Welcome to Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails. It's December 16th and I am at my home looking at cell camera photos, trying to figure out what I'm going to be hunting and where once the archery season opens back up again. So my first day will be the 23rd of December, but I probably won't hunt, I'm guessing, until after Christmas. I thought you might get a kick out of seeing what's on the 16 cameras that I've got on my farm right now. You know, it's a bit of an overkill, but I thought it was a really neat opportunity to be able to put that many cameras out and put them in a lot of different types of locations, just to see how the behavior of the deer change based on the location of the cameras, what kind of food sources they're sitting on, how close they are to human activity, stuff like that. So when we come back from break, I'm going to walk you through all 16 of these camera sites, show you what was on those for the past 48 hours, and then we'll talk about any conclusions and what we can learn from that. Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails is brought to you by Redneck Blinds, Code of Silence Apparel, Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail App, Whitetail Institute, Research equals results, B3 releases, XO broadheads, exact sights, Muddy Outdoors tree stands, Stealth Cam trail cameras, and Hoyt. It's also interesting in looking at these photos that Stealth within their app offers the ability to analyze the data. So in a few cases, I didn't do it on all 16 of these, but in a few of them, I showed you how to go about navigating and finding where you can look at the data, and then a little bit about what we might learn from what I pulled from these specific cameras. So let's start at the first location. My first spot here is just an open gate leading from a timbered ridge out into a pick cornfield. Not a whole lot going on there in the last couple of days. There's a really nice 3-year-old buck in there. We saw him back in November. I think in a couple of years, he should be a real dandy. So this is a soybean plot that I overseeded, where I drilled Whitetail Institute power plant into during the summer. So the deer fed there fairly actively. The beans, there's still some beans left, but they've eaten most of the beans in this plot. There's probably 5% of the stand still remains, but there's sorghum there too in this location. So there's some chance that even if they're not eating the beans, that they're going to be there eating the sorghum. But I did pull the data from the Stealth Cam Command Pro app, and you can see I really kind of look at temperature, like how the amount of movement or the number of photos is based on the temperature, and then also on the time of day. And this one is probably pretty typical of what I'm seeing on the farm. Probably 2/3 nighttime activity and 1/3 daylight. And you can see, again, just looking at this data, some of the other things that you can pull off this, which is pretty cool. Next location is just a scrape on a 4-wheeler trail running through the timber. I do think it's interesting that back in the timber on these trails, there's more daylight activity as a percentage than what there is out in the open. And I suppose that just stands to reason. The deer are more in the timber, so anytime you can have a camera back in those locations, you're going to catch more daylight activity. But they're still working scrapes a little bit. No mature bucks. In fact, I didn't get hardly any mature bucks, period, on any of the cameras. But that's the scrape on the trail. So this next location is just another trail, and it's an open gate between timber and an open field. And there is food in a food plot in this open field, but for whatever reason, this location didn't pull a whole lot of deer through. The next spot is kind of my all-star performer. This is the spot where I was sitting with Jordan when she had that buck come in that we almost got a shot at. Tons and tons of photos here. This is a corn food plot, knocked the corn down, and it's right next to timber. And you can see there's a lot of deer showing up on here. And also looking at the data, you can see that a decent percentage, probably somewhere less than half for sure, are showing up during the day. Mostly nighttime activity. Is probably pretty similar to the other plot that I showed earlier. Probably, you know, 1/3 to 25% daylight, and the rest of it is at night. Might even be higher percentage of nighttime activity on this one. And you can see too that when it was cold, the number of photos was a lot higher. And I guess that stands to reason. We've always said that, you know, when it's really cold, the deer are going to go to corn, and you can definitely see that on the data here. The next one is just a field that was planted to, first it was drilled to beans, and then the deer ate the beans during the summer, so I drilled the Whitetail Institute wintergreens into that. So there's still some there, and then there's sorghum that's adjoining that. And you can see that this location, it's got a reasonable mix of morning and evening, or daytime and nighttime. Interestingly, the camera here is one of those revolver cameras from Stealth. So you see a wide range of camera angles, even though I've got it set so that it's in chronological order. But you can see it jumps around quite a bit, which is kind of cool. You know, the camera spins wherever there's some activity. It spins and takes a picture there, and then it might spin and take a picture in another direction for the next photo. This next spot is also a Brassica plot. This was another one that I planted first to beans, and then when the deer ate that during the summer, I drilled the Whitetail Institute wintergreens into there. And the deer have been hitting this really hard. This was the spot that we called the fat buck field, or the fat buck plot. This is where he was coming out back in early October. And the deer are still using this one really heavily. This one is probably, if I had to pick one spot to say we're gonna go and see a deer in the daylight, this is gonna be the spot. And I am really impressed overall with the revolver. I was skeptical at first, not knowing if it would spook deer or, you know, how that was gonna work out. But it's not spooking deer. It takes a lot of photos, and it's fun to see how it flips from one corner of the field to the other, taking pictures depending upon, you know, where the deer are moving. So you can get a deer starting on one end, walking all the way across, and the camera follows it the whole way, which is pretty cool. This next one is just a camera set towards a trail that leads to a pond, and obviously as frozen as everything is now, the pond isn't getting any use, but it's also right on the edge of a food plot that was the Whitetail Institute wintergreens and fall rye. So this one doesn't show anything to get too excited about. This next camera is set up on a scrape. It's on the bench right above the driveway next to the buildings. Lots of activity here during the night. It's interesting that the bucks are still coming in there pretty consistently and checking that, but it's all 100% on this spot after dark. I didn't get any daylight photos there, even if I go back over the last 10 days. So this next one is a bean plot located right along the driveway. It's not too far from the highway that goes past the farm, but you can't see it from the highway. So it's not like people are stopping and looking at deer, but still there's almost no daylight activity on this plot. You know, lots of food, some decent amount of deer using it, but they're using it almost entirely at night, which I guess is kind of typical of what I'm seeing on most of the cameras on the farm. Most of the activity is at night, and on this spot it's almost all at night. This next camera is located right in a picked cornfield. And you're going to see some activity on here, but very little daylight activity on this camera. And the next one here is very similar. It's just a short ways away, maybe 100 yards away on that same picked cornfield. And I thought it would be fun to get the revolver camera out there and just see what's coming into these picked fields. See if there's any daylight activity, you know, when they're using these spots. Just get a better sense of what happens in these open fields compared to smaller food plots or trails back in the timber, and that sort of thing. And you can see there's some activity here. It's a A lot of it's at night, just like the rest of the cameras. There's one mature buck on these two cameras on this pick cornfield. It's that 8-pointer that I was hunting last year during the bow season. And so far on all of these cameras, he's the only mature buck that I've picked up on any of them. These next two cameras are also located on corn. One of them is a white flash camera, and the other one is one of the revolvers. They're not too far apart, but you'll notice that I didn't get hardly any photos on the white flash camera, and I think it's because it just doesn't have the range capability that the other style has. It only, can penetrate so far with the flash. It takes really nice, sharp, pretty photos when the range is fairly short, like on a trail or over a scrape or something like that. The deer don't seem to pay any attention to the white flash in my experience here, but you can see here that there's a lot of deer out in this plot. When you look at the photos coming from the revolver camera, there's lots of activity here, lots of deer coming out, almost all at night though. I'd say 90+% of the photos on this spot are at night, but it is interesting to note that the one camera did a lot better than the other one did. Okay, these last two cameras are located at what we call the scrape tree, which is a corn or a soybean food plot down in the valley. And I would have thought this spot would have been pulling a lot of deer. There's timber all around it. I don't know why we're not getting more photos on these cameras. Pretty limited number. I mean, there's deer using it, but not very many, and most of the activity is at night. So there's some trends here that we can pull from looking at these photos on my cameras. The first one is that I'm in some serious trouble when it comes to finding a buck to hunt. Once the late season comes back around again for me here, unless something changes, pretty limited when it comes to mature bucks. I was hoping that with the firearm season and all the food that I've got, that something would have got pushed in, but that's not what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of really nice young bucks, but we've been seeing those, pretty consistently, ever since I started running cameras back in September. Fortunately, I've got another week before the season reopens, and maybe even longer than that, for a few more deer to show up, or maybe some of these mature bucks that I think are around to start showing up on cameras, or at least in daylight. So there is some power in these apps beyond just the ability to maybe see what's coming out in different locations. We can use this stuff to learn a lot more about deer, how they behave, how they move, what they do. And I think, to me, that's going to be the most fascinating part. I like the idea of knowing, where the mature bucks are at on the farm, so I know where to hunt. But I don't have to know minute by minute where they are. But I do think there's some really good information in the data that I can pull from these cell cameras, and I'm really looking forward to studying that a lot more closely. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I'll be back again soon. Probably the next episode is going to be the Christmas story. Looking forward to that. That's my annual reading of the Bible from Luke, the story of when Jesus was born and why we celebrate Christmas. So look for that soon. Well, I appreciate you joining me here at Hoyt's Bowhunting Whitetails, and I'll see you right back here again in a couple of days for the reading of the Christmas story. And remember to always dream big.